Welcome, fellow Cinephiles, film enthusiasts, and relaxation seekers. My name is Cinephile ASMR, your go-to ASMR and movie-loving experience, with today being an incredibly important video. And if you couldn't tell based off of my dashing attire, we are discussing the best films of 2022. Of course, this has been a video a year plus in the making, and before I dive into things, let me preface something. So firstly, this is March. Of course, this is 3 months into 2023, but I really don't believe in this idea of posting your best of the year lists before the year is even ended. I know a lot of it is done for views, clickbait, and a lot of it, but you'll see in those videos specifically that some of the creators haven't even seen all of the movies that they've wanted to. Not for me though. I have now officially been able to have seen roughly around 70-ish movies from 2022, and I spent so much time, of course, watching them, organizing, even reviewing them to place which belong at the top spot. 2022 has been a miraculous year for filmmaking, from all shapes, sizes, colors, groups. It has been a beautifully wonderful, diverse, eclectic year, and it has been very difficult to organize this list, but I have painstakingly put some blood, sweat, and tears into it. And finally, I was originally going to make it a top 10 list, but when I really started thinking about it, I had to make it a top 15 with a few honorable mentions. So of course, as we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, and if you haven't subscribed, with commenting your best of the year list as well. This is a community and I couldn't have done it without you guys, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Starting off the list is the honorable mentions, which I will bring it off to a start with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This is a film that I was so eager to make a video on. I saw it multiple times in the theater, and I think life just got the best of me, but I deeply regret not talking about it because as a Marvel film, it excels, but as a movie on its own, with its own beating heart, of course basing it off of the real-life tragedy of Chadwick Boseman's passing, I was so intrigued to see where it went, and I think it excelled in almost every single category. I have a few minor gripes here, a lot of it having to do with the government side plot and the Riri Williams introduction. I understand the placements, but with as long of a runtime and with as much story as it needs to cover, I felt it did kind of take me out. But outside of those alone, it introduces what I gotta believe to be the greatest MCU villain in a lot of different ways, with Namor, with Tenoch Huerta behind the back of him, and I will honestly say Shuri, Letitia Wright, brought her A game in a way that I just couldn't believe. And of course Angela Bassett getting the award-worthy recognition, but everyone really finding this as an opportunity to vent about the real-life passing of Chadwick Boseman. The film broke me. It was beautiful, I loved it, and it is starting this list off. Next up is a movie that I think a lot of people forgot because it came out so early in the year, with Robert Eggers' The Northman. I loved this movie. It was brutal, it was beastly barbaric, and it stuck with me up until this point. Is it perhaps as uniquely into its creative decisions as perhaps The Lighthouse or The Witch? No, but when you have $90 million, I think the studio interference was not nearly as bad as I expected. It was an absolute thrill to experience this movie in theaters. It is grotesque in every shape and form, and you gotta give it up to Alexander Skarsgård, who just is an annihilating monster in this. This dude is like 7 feet tall, and he has nothing but pure muscle, with the camera work especially detailing his insane physique. Every part of this film I thought really worked for its betterment, leading to a finale with two dudes who are basically naked fighting in a volcano to the death. That is all you need to know to understand just how great this movie is. Next up is going to be one that will definitely surprise you, and you will get this a lot throughout this video, is a lot of different surprises, but another heavy honorable mention is Terrifier 2. Now of course this is a very niche pick. This has to be something that you are tailored to love. If you are a fan of slashers, B-budget horror movies, 80s to 70s grindhouse, you will adore this movie, and I did not expect to love it as much as I had because I'd never seen the original Terrifier, but having come out of the theater with it being a very minimal theatrical run, but a lot of people with word of mouth, I had not seen a single trailer that got me into the seat, though, was the word of mouth alone. I adored this movie. The experience of watching it, the fan reaction from people that are just die-hard horror movie fanatics coming out of this, just having a great time. Art the Clown cementing himself in the iconography of horror icons. I mean, my god, he is up there with Leatherface, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees. He is sadistic, and there is moments where you just really have to appreciate the practical effects. Where the story goes, it's cheese, the not so great acting, but it was just so much fun, and I got exactly what I wanted out of Terrifier 2 as a true horror fanatic. Another very strong honorable mention I have to give to Cooper Rife's Cha Cha Real Smooth. This movie was just so pure through and through, really focusing on what a midlife crisis at the age of 20 is like. You know, as someone really trying to come into his own, seeing someone struggle within that same sort of facet, finding who he is while also creating a love within someone entirely out of his league was just so beautiful to see. Dakota Johnson literally is in the industry for a reason, and I felt the chemistry that they shared as two very lost people kind of coming together really just touched my heart, and it definitely deserved more attention. And finally, my last honorable mention, barely making the list, is the talking young little freaking shell, Marcel the Shell with shoes on. This feels truthfully like a warm blanket on a cold day. It is exactly the kind of movie you need to lift your spirits, and it honestly had me bawling from beginning to end. It really is disalarming to watch a talking shell, and you would have no idea where the story evolves, as the shell really is just trying to find their home, their people that has once been found and now it's lost. And I just truthfully found this to be such a blast of a time. It'll touch you creatively, but most importantly on a personal level, and I for one had no idea that this movie was going to pack the punch that it did. Alright, so starting at number 15, we have Woman Talking. I honestly think that this is the best script of the year. It had me hanging on the edge from beginning to end, centered on a group of women in this sort of isolated religious colony who begin to stand up for their own rights as they realize that they have been sexually assaulted in their sleep, as they either decide to fight back, leave, or just not say anything. And for 2 hours you hear different perspectives of different women in various positions of their lives, and experiences dictate the outcome and future of not only their lives but the colony as a whole. And I could not believe the directions this story took. It flies by, only staying in the location of this barn that these women are talking, and it has to really go to Sarah Polley for not only directing but writing a very poignant, disturbingly shocking but necessary project that'll have you hanging until the last minutes. It is meant to unnerve you, and when you realize that it is a true story, it contextualizes everything that you've seen. But it is a masterpiece of a project, and I love it, and I only think it'll get better with time. At number 14, though, we have Tar. Now this is about obsession, about art, about manipulation, about so much, and I honestly had such a great time with this movie. Cate Blanchett is in the conversation and has won quite a bit of awards for her performance, which I think is very deserved. However, I would place it into someone else's category that we'll get into later down the line, but honestly this movie really wraps you into really thinking that this is someone's truth. But the fact of the matter is that this is a fictional story that sets itself in such a realistic lens, following a composer who basically loses herself to her own demise. I think Todd Field directs the absolute hell out of this movie, really offering some of the best camera work, direction, and sound design that I have seen, that plays moments that could otherwise just be played straight. Very terrifying. You sit back and watch the kind of dissolvement of a person's personality through the ways in which they decide to choose their life through fame. Lydia Tarr is a menace to society, but this movie is phenomenal. It can be a little slow for some, but if you're into character studies, you're going to love this movie. Up next at 13, we have Glass Onion. I make no bones about the fact that Rian Johnson is truly one of the greatest artists working today. From every project he has touched, there is this sharpness to his storytelling, both visually, as he works with a lot of the same people, whether it be his cinematographer, Stephen Yeldon, his composer, Nathan Johnson, and I think that close-knit sense of community is relevant and impressive in every project he makes. It's a little family that he creates with not only that, but an engaging mystery that I will say the greatest praise I can give for Glass Onion is it feels nothing like Knives Out, and when you're watching a murder mystery sequel set in the same universe, what else could you ask for? Its structure will leave your head whirling in a way that completely changes everything you've seen by the end and reveals with beautiful, impeccable direction, particularly scene involving lighting and a blacked out house with the lighthouse light just surrounding it. It truly is a filmmaker's paradise to gush over so many different moments. The cast is impeccable, and if you haven't seen the movie, it's on Netflix. I cannot recommend it more. And I mean, who doesn't love Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc? Next up, at my number 12, is a film that makes the whole reason why I waited this long to make this video count, because this and quite a few other films on this list I had just seen recently, and without, my list would be completely different. But let's talk about Triangles of Sadness. This movie took me by surprise and on a journey that I honestly can almost guarantee you will not predict, following a group of the wealthy elite aboard a yacht as it kind of goes awry, whether through their own corruption, their greed, or just their inability to work together. This movie says so much about the state of the world, art, criticism, and it does not discriminate from who it talks about. Ruben Östlund is a filmmaker that I had not seen anything prior, but this movie, by the end, I think it might just be my favorite comedy of the year. It'll have you reeling, but also kind of just thinking after you laugh as to what exactly it is that made you chuckle in the first place. It is so densely layered with a plot that evolves in ways that you think, how is it gonna go from here? But man, oh man, you just wait. There was scenes in this movie that when you start to really think that they are what they are, you find it less likely for it to even exist. What I mean by that is, when I was watching this movie, literally there's moments that I would not recommend you watch if you have a weak stomach, where there is certain fluids coming out of both the mouth and the opposite end, and the way that this movie just shows that and integrates it into a story, and I, having seen it, understand why it was included, just made me scratch my head as to how this film worked. But lo and behold, it did. At my number 11 is a project that I probably can almost guarantee you've never heard of as well, with Gerard Carmichael's stand-up show, Rethaniel. Now this might be slightly cheating because it's only about an hour long, but hey, it's my list, and it is worthy of the inclusion. Outside of this, Gerard Carmichael has kind of been someone that I've heard in the background and in the peripheral, but this special, directed by Bo Burnham, completely cracked open what I thought to be kind of stand-up comedy. I'm not the biggest fan. Comedy, of course, is the hardest genre for me to get into, as I've stated before, but the way that Gerard is able to engage with the audience and the audience engage with Gerard just opens the door for vulnerability on a level that you just have never seen. And if you're a fan of Bo Burnham, I guess you could kind of say you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say this, because in an hour, Gerard faces himself, his life, his family, walking the tightrope of who he wants to be versus the person that the people want him to become. And in an hour, you see the evolution of a person kind of scared in their own skin evolve into, oh my god, just a person that is confident to say who they are. It boils down to the title itself, Rethaniel, which when you realize why it's titled that way, my god, it gave me goosebumps head to toe from the opening shot to the framing. It is just a beautiful special that I could just watch Gerard Carmichael speak for the rest of my life. Let that man narrate my life. I mean, it would be pretty boring, but it's just showing how interesting of a person he is. Now, starting the top 10 list, I have to say, all of these movies are basically 5 out of 5s for me. They're excellent in their own rights, and having to rank them was tough, but starting it off, I have to give person, as a viewer, as a watcher. I honestly could not believe the fact that this movie was not talked about more. It has Colin Farrell in his third or fourth film of 2022, but it might just be my favorite role that he's ever done, following a family set in the sort of future where they have sort of like this AI robot who is caring for them, but when he suddenly and mysteriously shuts down, they try and repair him, and in between they realize that perhaps they've had a bit of a reliance on this robot in order to make this family stay afloat. So you have this daughter, this couple, just coming together and realizing who they are in the midst of their only semblance of technology that they've utilized not working. And from that point on, what follows is a film so tender and endearing, from its shots to the colors to the score. It makes sense that Kogonada just loves the world the way that he does, because this movie will really make you feel like you're connected with your inner self, within what you love, and it'll reaffirm the fact that I think more movies that are produced by A24 need to get recognized, and why A24 is so good at what they do in the first place. Everyone involved deserves a round of applause for this project, and you definitely need to check it out. At number 9, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. To say that I had no idea where this film was gonna go, and really with such minimal expectations, as Pinocchio as a project has been done, I mean, twice already outside of Pinocchio. Last year alone, it has been milked, and I just thought to myself, how are they going to redo this? But man, am I going to eat my words for the rest of my life. I'll never doubt Del Toro. Del Toro, lo siento. He deserves the world, and I hope it wins Best Animated Feature. To put this in a frame, this is written, directed by Del Toro, but also by the man who worked on Fantastic Mr. Fox, along with the person behind Over the Garden Wall. So when you create a love child within those three minds, you get a film so saturated in its time, in its war efforts, within what Guillermo del Toro was so famous for with his earlier works like Pan's Labyrinth, Kronos, and it feels like a return to form for his earlier roots. It has a lot to say about wartime fascism, but also what it means to be human, the spiritual side of it all. And visually, this film just is bursting with creativity and imagination when it dips into the ideas of the afterlife, the beyond period, and realizing why it's so important to hold on to the now. That's when the film won me over, because it goes in so many different directions, and by the end, it cohesively works to tell a beautiful story about a father and a wooden boy that he can call his son, but in a way that you will just be in shambles by the end. I think for some, this being so high, or maybe even so low for people, will get you riled up, but at number 8, I have to give it to Avatar: The Way of Water. You truly can never bet against James Cameron, and of course, I am saying this purely off of the theatrical experience I had the luxury of experiencing for 3 times, each in resounding 3D IMAX the way it's supposed to be intended. And I understand, is it really fair to give a movie such praise based off of things that won't always be the case? It'll be released on DVD, and it'll be far more an inferior experience. I will say though, not completely void of the love I have for it, because I think this film, especially compared to the first, is seeped in emotion from beginning to end, and the way the parallels of how the film opens and closes, I'm not gonna lie to you, it wasn't just the visuals that swept me up, but the sheer emotional storytelling that Cameron and co have to say. This could have only not even just technically been made by someone working in the industry for so long, but also someone who has lived life as long as James Cameron has. It is a truly beautiful love letter to family, to the generational youth, and it just, to me, symbolized a lot about what James Cameron is feeling as a person. The visuals, of course, chef's kiss, but for me, it was in those final 30 minutes where you see the Sully family come together and the figurative baton go from Jake to his kids that kind of sent me over the edge, and as I rewatched it, that's what held on to me the most over and over again. I can't ever bet against James Cameron again. Now switching heavily, at number 7, we have We're All Going to the World's Fair. If you've never heard of this movie, I don't blame you. You really have to seek this project out. But for me, this movie, I think above the rest on this list, was the thing that smacked me in the face the most, was the one that was honestly not even on this list when I first saw it. But as the days progressed, my mind became more infectious towards this project. It really is the epitome of growing up with kind of like an unrestrained access to social media, to the internet, and no matter how much you can connect with people on the internet, it truthfully makes you feel more lonely, more isolated than anything in your life. I couldn't believe how caught into this movie I was, and what worked so well for me was not the fact that I realized that while watching I was invested, of course, but it was the preceding moments after where then I realized, oh my God, this movie understands, especially if you are in your early 20s or in your teens, you would know what that sort of access to social media, if you've been given that, feels. And it's all basically centered on this internet phenomenon called the World's Fair. And once you do a certain amount of steps, the main character, Casey, begins to start to lose themselves. But it's all just a guise to show what it's like to feel alone in this world, but also when you have that connection with someone, with anyone on the internet, it's scary, it's risky, it makes you feel vulnerable, but also heard. And oh my God, this film needs to be experienced in order for you to truly understand what I mean. And I cannot sing this film's praise anymore, from the actress who portrays Casey, to the direction, to the minimal shoestring budget that all works to the film's ambiance and tone. I cannot believe just how affecting this film was on me. And as I start going down the list, getting closer and closer, I have to impart the fact that honestly, up until this point on, these films changed the order that I put them in, because honestly, catch me on any given day and it might be in a very different order. But for today, at number 6, we have Jordan Peele's, in my humble opinion, magnum opus, Nope. I was absolutely encapsulated by this movie. I think, to honestly say it, when it was all said and done, yes, there was these superhero films, yes, there was Avatar, but being able to experience a horror film with $40 million put behind it on IMAX cameras was an experience I don't think I'll ever forget. Being able to experience the way that the story progressed on the big screen, and seeing just the collaboration alone between Hoyt van Hoytema, a man who has used that budget, those IMAX cameras for Christopher Nolan level films, working with Jordan Peele's mind, shooting the day for night stuff. My God, that movie just took me and did not let go. And of course, you cannot talk about Nope without expressing just how good Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer are as these brother and sister working together to figure out what the hell is going on. It's iconic, to say the least. I think it is Jordan Peele operating on a level that he has never even come close to yet, but he works in all shapes and sizes to his betterment. I mean, 3 films in, this man has yet to miss, and he has offered such differing stories, and all of them really coming together based off of what he has to say. And this time, oh my God, it is everything about the industry, about everything towards Hollywood, but most importantly, it just is so good. While it does have a lot to say within Jordan Peele's typical commentary fashion, it doesn't stray away from just being a good time, leading to one of the best finales that 2022 has to offer. Oh my God, I mean, there's just images that'll be ingrained in my mind with how the alien ship looks, with how the finale is shot, and when it utilized the IMAX format, oh my gosh, there is nothing that'll ever compare. And at number 5, we have Matt Reeves' knockout endeavor into the iconic character with the Batman. I will say, to me, that film really resembles a great time in my life. I was making a lot of videos, and especially pertaining to that project, it helped to grow the channel as I did my Riddler roleplay, as I did the review, and it really opened the door for a lot, not just as a creator, but as an aspiring filmmaker. That film was just immaculate. It's safe to say that if you're going to take a swing with making a Batman story, you best make it original, because because I would say he's by far the most milked DC character, and surprisingly, I have loved almost every iteration to adored it, and I think at this point in time, I can safely say Matt Reeves has crafted my favorite. Of course, we will see where that world goes, but the Gotham that we see in this movie is corrupted in a way that makes the Italian mobster films in De Niro with Pacino, with Scorsese behind it, look like child's play. Robert Pattinson has easily cemented himself as a person to not joke around with. I think it is only just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, with not only his character but his performance and the world as a whole of Gotham. Leaving this off with the hopeful reminder that Batman as a symbol is that of hope instead of vengeance, the way that it goes full circle and evolves. I'm just obsessed. I could not get enough of it when it came out, when it released on Blu-ray, and I've probably seen that film the most out of any that have released this year, for good freaking reason. All hail to Matt Reeves, Greg Fraser, Michael Giacchino. That man literally put his whole heart into that score, and I listen to that on a weekly basis. If anyone says that the Batman is bad, they don't know cinema, because it was so good. And at number 4, I have to give it to the oddly polarizing Damien Chazelle's Babylon. You know, I could understand why some people don't really connect with this film, but seeing the visceral hatred that this project has been given just utterly flabbergasts me. I mean, a movie that looks this good alone, sounds as phenomenal as it does, and is directed as keenly as Chazelle only could do. You cannot hate this movie. It feels truthfully like the harshest love letter, with every sentiment of hatred towards the industry, but the art that comes out of it being so pure and loving. It is those fleeting moments, if you've ever tried to shoot a project or make something of your own, that brief window of time when you realize you've made something good, when you have that bliss in your head. That is what Babylon feels like, and having seen it twice, I think it'll very much benefit from seeing it multiple times, because the beginning truthfully feels like this massive race where you are always doing something, whether it be the characters at a party, they're filming something, or they're just living lavishly. But the way that the film progresses and inevitably ends really gives this bittersweet sense of almost melancholy to it, because you realize that this is just so short-lived and the industry will chew out and dispose you at whim. And I love this film. Brad Pitt arguably gives the performance of his career. Margot Robbie shines, but Diego Calva, as an actor I have never seen before, ties this movie together as the gateway for the viewer. And seriously, there is scenes in this movie that I think will go down in history in years from now, being revered as some of the greatest not only monologues, but just beautifully constructed scenes that cinema has ever been graced with. Again, if you are not the biggest fan of it the first time, I cannot stress just how important it is to watch it again to maybe get a better sense of why this movie matters so much. Alright, here we are at the top 3 films. Now here I have to say that maybe ask tomorrow, ask me the day after, or a week or a year from now, it could be very different in this top 3. The top 3 are very much ironclad, but the order in which I place them in, it just caught me in a mood today, which could be very different tomorrow. But at number 3, the last film I saw most recently, literally within the week, and I'm so truthfully grateful I did, with Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave. Oh my god, this film knocked me on my behind in a way that it starts as this investigated murder mystery within the detective, who is this very seasoned veteran at his job, investigating the case of a disappearing husband as he interrogates the widow, but begins to sort of become attracted to her. As he watches her moves to investigate just if she's truthfully innocent, he begins to fall madly in love. And what follows, and what honestly starts as a very almost kind of like procedural detective story that is almost borderline hilarious at times, shot immaculately, might I add, turns into such a beautiful tale of forbidden love, of the difficult hardships that two people who love each other but are unable to pursue such feel. And when I say I think this is the greatest shot film of the year, and that the Oscars, no matter how much I do not care about them, really did this film dirty in a way that I would put with Toni Collette in Hereditary, I mean it. This film just absolutely wowed me from beginning to end. There were scenes in this film with shots that were contained. I questioned my sanity as to how in the hell I could even do anything remotely close to the beauty that Decision to Leave was. And if for anything, this movie carries with it probably one of, if not the greatest ending to a film I have seen in years. The way that this movie comes to a close, the way that it is juxtaposed to the themes, the imagery that has led up to it, I was absolutely flabbergasted. Nothing can prepare you for the way that this movie unfolds, the way that it looks, the story, the acting, the character work, and everything in between. Decision to Leave is a film that will be talked about, hopefully, if not by anyone, by Cinephile ASMR here for years to come. You do not want to miss Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave. And at number 2, I wrestled with the number 2 and 1 spot, but honestly, I have to give number 2 to, of course, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think the simple fact alone that this movie came out on its wide release in March, but is still being talked about as viscerally as it is, and like the way that an Oscar film that is released in October, November, December is, just says so much. Now, while it is not my number 1, I am dearly rooting for this film to win everything. I have yet to see a film made with so much vocal love. You see any behind the scenes footage of the Daniels, Michelle Yeoh, Ki-Wei Kwan, Stephanie Hsu, Jamie Lee Curtis, the praise and the singing of adoration that they give to this film, the team, and the heart with the story behind it just leaves me an emotional wreck. When I saw it back in March, it changed me fundamentally, and when I saw it again over and over again, it has inspired me countless times. And I have to really just bring it to a focal point that this movie was made with such a small team. I believe it was like 7 VFX artists that leading up to this film had not worked in VFX before, but it's that level of innovation and sort of small scale turned big based off of their craft filmmaking that made this project worth so much. There's a reason why it's being touched on so heavily by almost all of the film community. It is immaculate. It is perfection. It deserves editing. It deserves direction, costuming, writing, acting. Michelle Yeoh is my front runner for Best Actress because, honest to God, nobody has delivered it the way that she has, and it is so well deserving. Not only with her, but Ki-Wei Kwan, Stephanie Hsu, even Jamie Lee Curtis. If they all got the Oscar, I would honestly kind of have a little bit of faith in the Oscars, not just from a Will Smith slap. But this all now leads to my number 1 film, the project that has absolutely shook me to my core, has redefined the way that I perceive filmmaking, but more importantly, storytelling. Charlotte Wells' After Sun, without question, put me in a daze, in a trance, and I truthfully can say I have not left this film once since I've seen it. You know, when you watch a movie and you start thinking about it after, days after, in blips, in spurts, with After Sun, for me, every time I think about it, it almost completely just invades my mind. If I was thinking about something, if I was doing something, it practically wins me out of whatever I was focusing on to then completely be obsessed with this. And it really isn't until the movie ends that you understand just how impactful it is. You watch this movie and you first question where it is leading to. There is subtle hints about mental illness, about this father-daughter dynamic, where you wonder where it is leading to. And within those final 10 minutes, which I would argue is probably up there again with Decision to Leave as some of the greatest of all time, let alone for a feature film debut by Charlotte Wells. If you have any parental issues, if you've had any difficulty within your familial unit, it is honestly one of the hardest films I have ever had to endure, but subsequently the most rewarding after experience I've ever had. Paul Mescal as this broken father trying to piece it all together for his daughter just absolutely transformed me. There is very few performances that I can really get behind and say that it is something that has revolutionized the medium, but for me, as someone who loves the unwritten word, Paul Mescal resoundingly changes the game, and I think with his support for feature filmmakers for small independent films, it is projects like this which are produced by A24, directed by such brilliant talent like Charlotte Wells, with honest vulnerability that'll hit you like a bunch of needles, that is making me so hopeful for the industry going forward. I cannot sing this film's praise anymore, and it was the beautiful way to wrap up a year so vastly diverse in its visions, in its storytelling, within its voices, putting pen to paper and onto the screen. I love this year so much. Virtually every movie that I talked about, from the honorable mentions, from all the way from 15 to 1, is practically a near 5 out of 5 to almost being a 10 out of 5. It is a year that I truthfully felt when the pandemic happened, when all of these artists were only left to their devices cooking in the kitchen. It was this that made me realize, man, it is so good to be back. It feels so wonderful to have art to bring color to the world, but I truthfully could not have done it without you guys. So with all that being said, let me know of what you thought of this list, but also your favorites of the year. Let me know down below. I cannot wait to see all of them. I love you guys so very much. Stay tuned for some great videos coming soon. Cheers to 2023. I love you, and remember to take life one frame at a time.